The person who's beating you right now probably started with less talent, less education, fewer connections, and they're still pulling ahead every single week while you wonder what you're missing. You're about to find out the exact mechanism they're using, whether they know it or not. Most people think advantages come from being born smart, knowing the right people, or having some gift that can't be taught. That belief is comfortable because it lets you off the hook. If the winners were always chosen at birth, your position makes sense. But when you study the people who dominate fields they had no business entering, a different pattern shows up, one that has nothing to do with genetics. In 1994, a college dropout named Sarah Blakely was selling fax machines door to door in Clearwater, Florida. She had no fashion experience, no business degree, no investors, no connections in the garment industry. She had $5,000 in savings and an idea about cutting the feet off pantyhose. Every hosiery manufacturer she called hung up on her. Every lawyer she approached to patent the idea either laughed or quoted fees she couldn't afford. She drove to the patent office and wrote her own application using a textbook. 2 years later, Spanx was on the shelves at Neiman Marcus. A decade later, the company was valued at over $1 billion. Blakely still owned 100% of it because she'd never taken outside funding. So what was her advantage? She spent 2 years doing what nobody else was willing to do at that volume. Cold outreach, personal rejection, manual problem solving every single day for a product most people thought was ridiculous. The sheer density of her effort in a narrow window created something that looked, from the outside, like overnight success. This is the first piece of the mechanism. Concentrated obsessive effort in a specific domain over a compressed time frame creates what researchers call a competence spike. While everyone else spreads their energy across 12 goals, the person who pours everything into one area for 6 to 18 months develops pattern recognition that takes generalists years to match. The volume changes the quality of your thinking. You start seeing shortcuts that are invisible at lower intensity, but effort alone tops out fast. Plenty of people grind themselves down and end up exactly where they started. The difference is what you do with the feedback. Anders Ericsson, the psychologist behind the research that got distorted into the 10,000 hours myth, was specific about this. Raw practice hours barely predict performance in most fields. What predicted mastery was a particular kind of practice, isolating the weakest subskill, drilling it with immediate feedback, adjusting, and repeating at the edge of current ability. He called it deliberate practice, and it's genuinely uncomfortable. Your brain resists it the way your muscles resist the last rep. Think about the last time you practiced something. Were you repeating what you already knew how to do? Or were you spending most of your time on the part that made you feel clumsy? That distinction separates people who plateau at pretty good from people who become dangerous. A chess player who replays their losses move by move, asking, "Where exactly did my judgment fail?" improves faster than one who plays 100 casual games. A salesperson who records their calls and studies the exact moment prospects disengage learns more in a month than most learn in a year. The feedback has to sting a little. If practice feels smooth, you're rehearsing, you're performing for yourself. Now, here's where the real asymmetry develops. Deliberate practice builds skill, but an unfair advantage requires something else. A unique combination that makes you hard to replace. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, wrote about this. He was never the best artist, never the most experienced business mind. He was reasonably good at all three. That specific intersection, decent art, decent humor, deep understanding of office politics, created a niche where he had almost no competition. Any one skill alone would have made him average. The combination made him singular. You can engineer this. Take your primary skill and pair it with something unexpected from a completely different domain. A programmer who understands behavioral psychology builds better products than a programmer who only studies code. An accountant who writes well becomes the person clients actually want to talk to. A personal trainer who understands nutrition science and marketing has 3 revenue streams instead of 1. The math behind this is striking. If you're in the top 25% in one skill, you're competing with millions of people. Stack 2 skills, where you're in the top 25% each, and you're now in roughly the top 6% of that intersection. Stack 3, and you're in a category so small that competition nearly disappears. Each additional skill doesn't add to your advantage, it multiplies. Critics will point out that just be good at 3 things oversimplifies the problem. They're right. The combination has to make sense for a specific market. Being good at chess, pottery, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a fun life. But those skills don't compound into professional leverage unless you find the rare context where they intersect. The stack has to solve a problem that someone will pay for. That's the strategic part most people skip. So you build the stack deliberately. You look at your field and ask, what complementary skill do the top performers almost never have? Then you go acquire it. The gap in the market is the gap in their skill set. There's a second layer to this that rarely gets discussed. The people with genuine unfair advantages control their information environment. They curate what enters their brain with the same discipline a chef uses to source ingredients. In the early 2000s, Charlie Munger gave a talk where he described his reading habit. He went through roughly 600 pages a day across annual reports, biographies, science journals, and history. His schedule was almost monastic. Reading, thinking, occasional meetings, more reading. He once said his children joked that he was a book with legs. The volume matters, but the diversity matters more. Munger pulled insights from biology and applied them to investing. He borrowed frameworks from engineering and used them to evaluate management teams. Each domain became a lens, and the collection of lenses gave him a perspective that pure finance people couldn't replicate. You can build a version of this system at any scale. 30 minutes a day of focused reading in a field adjacent to yours. Within a year, you'll have consumed roughly 50 books worth of material that your competitors never touched. That knowledge compounds silently until one day you see a connection in a meeting that nobody else sees, and the room turns toward you. But information without application becomes trivia. The bridge between knowing and advantage is a specific behavior: public output, writing, teaching, building, shipping, something visible. When you explain an idea publicly, you discover the gaps in your understanding. The holes you glossed over in private become obvious when someone asks a question you can't answer. Each piece of public work also becomes a beacon. It attracts people who think like you, opportunities that match your stack, and feedback from corners of the internet you'd never reach through networking alone. A software developer who writes a weekly blog about debugging edge cases will, within 18 months, have a body of work that functions as a permanent resume. An insurance agent who posts short videos explaining policy loopholes becomes the person strangers call first. The output is the advantage because most people consume and never create. This is where the honest caveat belongs. Structural barriers are real. Access to time, education, capital, and stable housing shapes how fast anyone can build these advantages. Telling someone working 2 jobs to just read more and build a skill stack ignores the physics of their day. The principles still hold, but the timeline stretches and the path gets steeper depending on where you start. Acknowledging that isn't defeatism. Pretending everyone starts from the same line is the actual lie. What you can control, regardless of starting position, is the ratio of intentional action to passive drift in whatever hours you do have. Even 15 minutes of deliberate skill building per day, targeted at a specific gap, stacks up to over 90 hours a year. That's enough to move from beginner to competent in a complementary skill. Competent is all you need for the stack to start working. Remember Sarah Blakely in Clearwater, cold calling hosiery mills from her apartment. She had no structural advantage whatsoever. What she had was density of action in a narrow domain, relentless feedback integration, and a skill combination that the industry had never seen packaged in one person. She reverse-engineered an unfair advantage from raw materials that were available to anyone. The formula is learnable. Concentrate effort in a compressed window, practice at the edge of your ability with honest feedback. Stack complementary skills until competition thins. Control your information diet, produce visible output, and do all of this with the understanding that the timeline is yours, no one else's. Your field is full of people coasting on yesterday's momentum. Every day they coast is another day your deliberate practice closes the gap. The advantage you're building is quiet right now. Give it 18 months. The gap won't be quiet anymore.